Welcome to Radix Facts. Today I'm going to be going over some detailed total G questions sent in by Kenny Sierra.
Okay, now to go over the questions Kenny sent, I'm going to be using my little rave just because it fits up on my desktop here easily. Go over the questions. I'll also show a couple details about my Nitro rave. Okay, one of the first questions Kenny sent was basically just general questions about my radio setup. What am I using as far as the installation? What am I using satellites? Where do I put them? That kind of thing. The little rave, I got total G set in the middle, horizontal front back. I've got two satellites, one on this side, one down the other side. Obviously I've powered this up since I had the radio on, so it's flashing telling me, hey, you've power cycled it, but that's okay. So I just got two satellites on a little rave. The big rave, I've got my 2-cell LiPo. I got a homemade voltage drop down, although a lot of times I use the spectrum drop down. Total G with 3 satellites. Got one satellite here, and another satellite over here. That's really my whole radio setup. I keep the wires bundled up. One big thing with the satellites, you want to make sure to keep the tension on the wires. Pull them sideways, keep tension on the wires. We found that the pins and the plugs sometimes will sit centered in the hole and kind of rattle and make a little intermittent contact with the pins. That can cause some issues. So as long as you pull it sideways, keep some tension on the wires, just light tension, it'll pull it and make continuous contact with the plugs. I do the same thing here. I tend to bundle it so I keep the pins pulled sideways to keep it loaded. This one actually isn't loaded, and it should be. The one in the back one needs a little bit of load on the back. Okay, now one other question we had was, does the total G work with DSMX? We have tested this. We've gotten a DXH transmitter, put it in DSMX mode with DSMX satellites. It will function with the DSMX settings, but it will not go into DSMX mode. It will always stay in DSM2 mode. So you can use the DSMX satellites, you can use the transmitter, everything, but it's going to stay in DSM2 mode. At the moment, the only thing I know of that actually will go into DSMX mode is if you use a specific receiver from Horizon that's set up for DSMX. So it'll still function with all the same equipment. It'll just stay in DSM2 mode. Okay. One other question. The next question I got was explain what channel settings I use in my transmitter. What channel settings I use to control what functions. This particular model, I'm using the 12X, my highly modified 12X. Channel selections, the defaults are basically set for my channel selections that I like. I just use aux3 for my flight control gain. I use aux2 for gyro, and I use gear for the governor, which are all basically defaults in the JR equipment for the gyro and the governor gear and aux2. That's really about it. I don't use aux A or B because I don't use any external channels for anything. I just use those 3 and that's it. Another question is, what's the difference between max gain and your basic flight control gain? Let's go down here to max gain. Okay, we have 2 things here, max gain and we have flight control gain. Max gain is basically a safety net. I mean, it's there to not, if you're running an aux channel, you can't just accidentally have the aux channel maxed out and you go fly and the model explodes because you have the gain too high. It's a limiter basically preventing you from going too high if you're using an aux channel. Now if you're not using an aux channel, like if you go up in the top and you set your flight control gain, you set the flight control gain up to G view where you're not using an aux channel, you're just going to set it internally, then your max gain, the gain you can get to, see it says G view D, which just means now your max gain is actually adjusting your actual flight control gain. So that's your only gain setting now, is your max gain. So that's if you go to the G view setting. If you stay with the aux channel, then max gain is now a limiter. So I go back up and set it back to aux3 that I have it. And then now I can't, with my transmitter, set it above this max gain setting. But now my transmitter is actually setting something below that if I want. Like when I flip the switch on the transmitter, I can alter my gain. Whereas if I'm using the G view, I can't do that. Okay? The next question I had is basically, I was asked was what is the aileron control setting and what's the elevator control setting. Basically what this is doing, T is telling us how much your transmitter pot on aileron has drifted since we turned it on, and how much the gyro sensor has drifted since we turned it on. In this case, if I move the aileron pot in the transmitter, you can see how much full deflection either way gives me how much move from neutral. When I go back to neutral, it's not perfectly centering. Like if I just tap on the transmitter, it's hovering around 4 to 6 units, which is fairly common with the new transmitters. If you're getting above 10, you're going to notice some drifting. You might notice some drifting, but anything below 10 is kind of normal. Same thing in elevator, bump elevator. It's going to show you a little bit of movement. Like that's neutral one way, that's neutral pulled the other way. It's about 4 units. See, it's back to 0 now. That's about average. On the neutral. The gyros on these are not drifting at all. They're sitting at 0 the whole time. So that's what those tell you. If you're having drifting issues, come into the interface and take a look at this, and this will help you find out if possibly you have a transmitter pod issue, or if you maybe have a gyro issue in the unit itself. Okay, now the next question was the proper way to set flight control limits. The flight control limits is over here. This is on the main page, radio setup in the Total G. One confusion on setting flight control limits is if you highlight something else in the parameter menus, it'll leave the gyros on. If you highlight these, it actually turns the gyros off. And what that means is their limits are going to change as you look at the model. So if I have, say, the orientation highlighted and then I give full aileron, I'm going to get one amount of pitch, which is the actual maximum limit the gyros can take it to. If I then highlight the gyro, it actually reduces that maximum. See, I just highlighted the actual limit. It actually reduced the amount of throw it can give. So if I go, so you don't want to check your limit throw when you have anything highlighted other than the actual limit setting, because that's what's going to tell you what your true limit is. So you want to highlight that limit setting, then take a pitch gauge and check your cyclic throw. And on the Total G, it should be 11 degrees, both aileron and elevator. Once you confirmed that it's 11 degrees, you then go in and hit the set button. You set it while holding right aileron, then you set it while holding left aileron, set it while holding back elevator, and set it while holding forward elevator. One indication that you might have set it incorrectly, like I've helped some guys set it up, and I'll pick their or help some guys with their Total Gs. I'll pick their model up and fly it, and immediately when I actually try to go to do a flip, it'll go really slow when I go to full limits. That's a hint that you probably set the limits up while having the wrong thing highlighted, because you probably set it up at 11 degrees maximum when it was both the control giving it and gyro giving it. So you actually set a limit up probably of only 8 or 9 degrees instead of the true 11. So just make sure to have these highlighted when you set those limits.